Hello and welcome to another Office Hours capsule. That's right, capsule. These are small segments of my Office Hours live stream that I do on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Changed it to a little bit earlier because I was finishing this up super late at night and I needed to get some more time to sleep. So come join us live, hang out with chat. We look at the latest news, we look at ISCs if they happen, we look at monthly reports, we look at roundups, we do a bunch of different news report stuff that we look through. And I'd love to hear your thoughts if you wanted me to do more. I've thought about doing looks at the developer updates because the developers have their own kind of tracker, the dev tracker on the RSI website to kind of go over some of that. I've done that in the past pretty well. So if you want to see me do anything like this live and then report it to you for news or lore or whatever, let me know in the comments down below. It helps me out a lot. And if you want to join us live. And the best way to do that is to follow us on Twitch, subscribe here on YouTube, hit that like button as well to help us out. And of course, hit that bell icon to notified when these go live and when these come out. With that being said, today we're going to look at the monthly report for March of 2023. So sit back, relax, grab yourself something to drink. This is going to be a bit of a long one, and let's get started. All right. So, PU monthly report for March 2023. AI tech. Throughout March, AI tech made significant improvements to various navigation systems and AI tool features. This included implementing support for overriding agent-type properties for navigation mesh generation, which enables the designers to generate meshes inside narrow areas and create more complex levels. For example, NPCs will be able to follow or search for players inside vents. We saw a little bit of that with the Inside Star Citizen Live last week. Another related feature is navigation volume cost areas, NVCA, which will impact navigation mesh generation and dynamic path computed during movement requests. There are both static and dynamic NVCA types. Static NVCAs are shape volumes pre-placed by the level designers when they want certain areas to be preferred or avoided during pathfinding. Dynamic NVCAs are shapes created at runtime based on player or NPC actions. For example, fire areas can be expanded or shrink, or areas featuring obstacles placed by players. AI Tech also continued to iterate and polish some otherwise completed features, including NPCs pushing trolleys and NPCs using transit systems and elevators, with or without trolleys. Support was also added for hover trolleys. Again, CIG is insane for putting the three most broken things in Star Citizen in one spot. Trolleys, elevators, and NPCs. That's not going to go well. But I look forward to the disaster that causes when it comes out. On to progress. On the AI tools side, the team iterated and added new functionality to the Apollo subsumption tool. So this is a tool they've mentioned in the past. This is just a new tool they use for subsumption. It's, I believe it's they said it on Star Citizen Live that it's not a generic tool. It's a custom tool for the AI designers or something like that. It makes it so it's easier for them to do. They just created a new tool for it. Some of the new functionality includes being able to reference engine component tags as part of the tag selector variable. They also moved the graph map to its own tab, added icons to the outline tab for easier viewing, and added a prompt for unsaved changes. I'm wondering if that item component tags part of the tag selector. I'm guessing that's for AI being able to remove components, possibly? I don't know about that. That's one. It's an interesting one. For Usable Coordinator, the team continued with quality of life improvements and updated UI functionality. AI Tech also completed a pass on the recent idle system improvements. Now they can correctly mark up specific movements in idle animations where it's safe to leave. This allows them to maintain the visual quality the animators expect without the needing to wait for the idle animation to fully transition into exit animation. They showed off a little bit of that with the stop animations on Star Citizen Live as well. So this just means that it'll look more fluid when they come out of idle states, and they can just cancel the idle states if something happens. We've seen in the past, they talk about things like AI is being able to react to the environment. So if something weird's going on, they can flee. If they're not combat AI, they can get into ready if they're combat AI. So they don't have to be like doing their own idle animations, then wait for the idle animations to stop, and then go into the stance they need to go into. This will just allow them to transition out of it much faster. Art characters. Last month, character art polished outfits for the Duster faction alongside with subscriber items for the year ahead. Production also began on the Frontier helmets. Concept-wise, art team explored the Headhunters and Rough and Ready gangs and prepared to hand off documents for the Dusters. So, Headhunters sounds familiar. They may have had their own lore. I think they have their own lore story. Let me look it up real quickly. I'm not seeing it. No, nothing there. Maybe I'm thinking of Halo, because I know there's a Halo thing that says Headhunters. I'm assuming that the Headhunters and the Rough and Ready gangs are Pyro gangs. Because we know that the Duster faction is, in fact, a Stanton gang, because we've had them in the past. They've even mentioned that they're more interested in hitting up locations where you will see production nodes going. So mining locations and on planets. They're more than the Ninetales, who are more of a pirate gang. These people more prey on like miners and such. That's why they're called the Dusters. I think that's what, if I remember correctly. So, all right. Art ships. The UK vehicle art team spent the month closing out the Argo SRV alongside 2 unannounced vehicles. Each progressed through the final final art pass stage, which includes LODs, damage, and optimization. What? That's 3 vehicles? All finished? Because the SRV is effectively done. And so it sounds like it's the SRV and 2 other vehicles are effectively done. That's a lot of vehicles. I can almost guarantee you that both of those vehicles will be available for 319 as well. So they're probably Invictus vehicles. As always, let me know down below what you think that might actually be. And in chat, of course, you can also tell me what you think those might be. Because they're Invictus, my guess would be an ambulance, like an Ursa ambulance sort of thing. And I don't know about the other one. It's hard to tell because Invictus is almost always a military ship. I can't think of any other military type ships we really need. Not small ones, at least. Not ones that would be created and ready to go. Hard to tell. We'll see. Misk Hole C received further support with the team fixing several visual bugs and polishing where needed. Progress on the Crusader Spirit continued with the ship moving from gray box to LOD 0 phase. The vast majority of the interior and exterior gray box work is now done. Wow, they are moving really fast in the Spirit too. So the whole C has been finished for a while now. It seems at this point they're just kind of slow rolling it, where they're just taking their time on it, because the whole C, to give context, holds 4,608 SCU. And can only load up on stations. So the whole C would not work as in the game currently. It needs some significant changes to the gameplay for it to work. So it seems like they're just kind of slowly working on it until they can get the changes they need to make it work. And as chat's pointing out, it also requires 32 SCU cargo containers, which we don't have yet. Though there was a preview recently that showed that off, so they're definitely working on it. But the Spirit being in LOD 0 phase, again, for those of you who don't know, LOD 0 is the phase that they do after gray box before final art, which means it's the last step before final art. Now, final art can take some time, but Crusader Spirit was just started at the beginning of this year. This is March, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Crusader Spirit line was finished by the end of April or possibly May. They're chugging right along. Now, I'm sure there's a progress report on there that tells when they're planning to be done, which I'm sure is like September, but they are moving really fast. So almost certainly we will see this Spirit series be available in-game starting IAE. Almost certainly. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the Spirit series, the SRV, because I don't know if the SRV will come in 3.19. I hope, but we'll see. So that's a lot. That's really fast, too. Whitebox began work on 2 unannounced vehicles, one receiving a flyable in-editor prototype. So we've got 2 additional vehicles, which are in Whitebox, so brand new. A component pass began on the MISC Freelancer to ensure the component bays adhere to the required metrics and open and close properly. Now here's the thing. I anticipate that this, as it's working, will end up being a full interior rework. It may not happen with this, but they're definitely going to have to do an interior rework of the Freelancer because it's just in a weird place. And I think this may be the catalyst to actually get in and do that, but we'll see. In the US, subscriber flare paints inspired by Microtech, Crusader, and Hurston were created. A graybox for a new vehicle approached completion. Some unique maneuvering components were heavily detailed, including the front housings and suspension system. Suspension system? Maneuvering? Suspension system tells me ground vehicle, but maneuvering components tells me spaceship. I don't know what this is. If I had to pull something out of a guess entirely, well, let's continue this. The seat enter-exit mechanism was fleshed out, while the front and rear doors were adjusted to prevent clipping to create a tight seal when closed. Front and rear. So for those of you who don't know, when they don't mention the ship, it doesn't mean it's something they haven't announced yet. So it's not something that they've already announced and they're working on and they're just secretly working on it. This is a brand new vehicle of some kind. And a vehicle could mean ship or ground vehicle. If I had to take a wild guess, and this is a wild guess with no other context here, I would say a hover tank. The Zavaran were known to have tanks. And they've mentioned it multiple times in multiple lore pieces that the Zavaran had tanks. And people have been asking for a hover tank for a while. And while the Xi'an having hover technology and having a hover tank would make sense, the Zavaran also did have hover technology. And that would make more sense to bring back in this sort of a stealth tank sort of thing, like a light tank compared to the Nova, which is a heavier tank. So, who knows? Graybox on the Apoa Santokyai is ongoing, with the wings and thrusters now fully modeled out. All clipping during motion has been addressed, and additional Xi'an tech used to move parts away from others. The landing gear was also redesigned to have a stronger look in comparison to the rest of the ship, while all the visible pistons were removed in favor of mechanical muscles. Oh, that's cool. I like that. Very cool. We saw the Santokyai updated on ISC last week, and it is very early Graybox compared to the other stuff we saw, which was much later Graybox. Even the Blinks was much later Graybox. Community. To coincide with the release of the RSI Scorpius Antares in Alpha 3.18, the community team published a Q&A answering key questions about the new EMP-equipped heavy fighter. 2 buttons. 2 players, 2 buttons. Then, in celebration of the opening of the Vision Center racetrack, the team hosted the first Star Citizen low-speed racing challenge. The community also supported the Stella Fortuna celebrations and held a festival screenshot contest. The Stella Fortuna also made use of the events tab on the Community Hub, recently debuted. The next major update of the Community Hub is already in the works, coming very soon. Also in March, they released the full schedule for ongoing Bar Citizen World Tour 2023. We're excited to see you in person as soon as possible. Remember, if you're organizing an event or just looking for one to attend in your vicinity, you'll find everything you need at barcitizen.sc, community team. The team has also been heavily involved in supporting the publishing and player experience teams with the release of and ongoing work for Alpha 3.18. Finally, the team has been entrenched in planning and organizing this year's CitizenCon event. I need to know more. I definitely need to know more. All right, all right. Whew. This is the engine section. I'm going to say what I say usually when it comes to the engine section. Look at me. And examine this physique. You may not like it, but this is what peak performance looks like. But sadly, this peak performance doesn't actually know a lot about engine stuff. I'm not a Starfleet engineer. I can't turn rocks into replicators. I do not know the canticles of the machine spirit. I am not a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus. I am not do not have the ability to assemble and disassemble a electric car by rote memory. I am not a Covenant engineer. I am but me, humble bartender and historian. So I will recognize some of these words, but I don't really understand the engine talk. So if you are an expert in this language, please do type down in the comments your thoughts on what this actually means. Several of you have been doing it, and I thank you for doing that. I will make sure to shout you out next time when we go through the engine stuff for those people who've been translating, and look you so you can look for them in the comments below if you also want to understand what they're talking about. Most of this is in the past has been graphics and other stuff like that. So. Engine. In March, the physics team worked on the consistent handling of wheeled vehicles between different gravity fields. That's actually legible. That's cool. Huh. Additionally, further improvements were made to OBB box pruning. There we go. I don't know what to talk about now. While lock stealing in the geometry intersection code was reworked. Data integrity regarding the mass assigned to a physical geometry was tightened, and a method was implemented to find parts of an entity that a rope is attached to between sessions. An optional update of grid space part bounds during reposition was added. This should save significant time during collision detection if thousands of crates attempted to collide with a ship consisting of several thousand parts. This is something they've been working on for a while. They've been working on some of the physics issues involved collision and its response in collision, because they wanted to reduce the amount of entities that spawned during a collision so you wouldn't overload the server with just garbage. So literal garbage in some cases. So the idea was to make it less laggy and more, and also less resource intensive. That's for sure. On the renderer, more code was refactored for Gen 12. Transient constant buffers are now used in more code. For example, an SSDO and motion blur. The processing of tessellated objects was improved so it would no longer execute unnecessarily. A lot of legacy render code was removed, deferred shading, shadow rendering, etc. And support for debug viz of anti-aliasing and shadow mask rendering was added. Improvements to temporal renderer mode for atmospheric and volumetric clouds continued. This included improvements to stabilized color neighborhoods for reprojection and transmittance profiles. On the core engine, the remote shader compiler server received a final round of substantial performance improvements. The exception handler was extended to better deal with recently occurring silent crashes. Based on the memory tracking information made available by Alpha 318 PTU, a new custom system allocator to replace Gemalock was implemented, which significantly reduces observed overallocation and fragmentation. This is currently in test. Furthermore, improvements were made to huge pages support. Work on streaming system improvements and new memory tracking tool continued too. The remainder of the time was spent supporting Alpha 318. That's kind of interesting. So we're seeing some performance boosts, is what it looks like, specifically focusing on the shader compiler and memory, which we knew were an issue. Some stuff to clouds, some renderer code stuff, and Gen 12. Interesting. I got most of that today. Features Arena Commander. In March, the feature team saw the first stage of Arena Commander's rework pushed to game dev. Now all development teams have access to the new front end, lobby system, racing tracks, and more. Someone asked earlier in chat if we had an update on racetracks. It sounds like racetracks are in Arena Commander now. The new ones that were in Stanton are now in Arena Commander, at least in the front end. So we'll see if that changes at all. Arena Commander features worked alongside the Planet team to improve LS3, Green, the planet that hosts Horizon Speedway. Updates include a new biome with higher mountains, increased water levels, and beaches to better represent the vast oceans and inland vacation destinations the races are hosted over. Interesting. So it looks like they're trying to craft Green to be a little bit more like the actual Green. People have asked in the past if this planet is done, right? The answer is no, but obviously they're going to be making as they go along, as they get closer to actually having Green in the game, because while it seems like a pipe dream, Green and the Ellis system isn't too far away from Stanton. It's only 2 jumps away. So it has a jump from Magnus to Green, or to Ellis, and it may go from Magnus to Nexus to Ellis. I can't remember exactly. But it's not far and not too difficult from, because there's a jump between Magnus and Stanton. So it's definitely one of the first systems we'll get after the first initial wave of systems. So that makes sense for them to try to kind of craft that now. But as we go along, I'm sure it'll get more and more dialed in and eventually be the planet that we actually see in game. So chat is telling me OBB box is basically what contains the ship and their 1,000 parts to single entity. Okay, for the engine stuff. Design began a full rework of the Defford Link racetrack alongside work on Old Vanderval. They also completed a pass of all holographic checkpoints to ensure they best represent the areas and environments. Design continued to improve and fix new Arena Commander front end with refined style sheet. Very nice. So this is where it gets kind of crazy. Features, characters, and weapons. Last month, the features team revisited the Prone Locomotion set, as several successful mechanics used in the new EVA system could be transferred over. So they are actively working. We know this for a while. They've been actively working on the new EVA system to add it to Star Citizen, though the locomotion was another thing they were adding. So it's interesting. For example, the player character will now roll on the spot instead of spinning around on the hips as the player looks around. The collision shape does not change. Okay, so instead of like right now when you roll on your back, you lift up, you look like you're doing crunches. I think now it's when you roll up and you look, you're actually rolling while you look as well. That's interesting. So it's more, yeah. This replaces the button press for switching between front and back, and the player can start moving from any prone pose. Very cool. A player's character's pivot has also been moved further forward, which centers the rotation in first-person view closer to the camera in both idle and movement animation sets. This makes rotation control far smoother, although requires a full update on all animations and transitions. As part of this, the collision shape has been changed from a single capsule to multiple smaller capsules. The main capsule is at the pivot, and the others trail out behind it and are allowed some freedom to retract. As a visual aid, consider this similar to a caterpillar. The end result is much better first-person experience with the fewer issues where the character gets stuck on terrain. Actor Features team. The team also supported new behaviors around weapon heating. There is now an option for FPS weapons to overheat, which requires user intervention to restore functionality similar to a reload action. However, before the weapon hits overheated state, it can change its behavior at various temperature thresholds. For example, the firing rate can increase, the fire mode can change to a beam type, or the number of projectiles fired into a single shot can increase. So the hotter the gun gets, the more it shoots. It changes from just like a to a laser. That's interesting. So there may be some advantages to overheating your weapons for some unique aspects. And this is obviously only for energy weapons, but we'll see. We'll probably see some of it for ballistic weapons too, as you overheat, because you can overheat ballistic weapons. Features, gameplay. In March, the gameplay feature team supported ongoing QATRs for mining updates and tractor beams. This led to improvements in the tractor beam UI, or UX. For example, adding a toggle for on and off rather than pressing and holding, and adding new augmented reality AR markers to show the validity of an item the player wants to attach. The team also improved the loot generation debug tools to make it easier to validate loot distribution, which is interesting because we definitely still, for those of you who don't know, I run an organization called the League of Relic Enthusiasts, or LORE. We do a lot of expeditions to derelict outposts to specifically loot and find the rare relics that can be found and artifacts that can be found at these sites. They haven't been working in 3.18 at all. We reported the bug and they reported a fix, but it's still not working as far as I can tell. So maybe this will help them find it a little bit better. So who knows? The ship refinery work also began. The design intentions were brought up to speed to allow the engineers to start work on the next sprint. So we see ship refinery works beginning. That's going on the thumbnail. Features mission. In March, the mission features continued to work on the salvage contract missions, adding polish and balance. Package extraction was also progressed towards its eventual release. Package extraction? We're looking at adding general cargo to mission ships to give the players a reason to investigate destroyed ships, or ships that are in soft death. Okay, so they're going to add more cargo to NPC ships, because right now they're pretty low. The ship escort mission that involves quantum travel progressed. Oh, I remember those missions are terrible. Everyone loves escort missions, right? The team's current focus is getting all base flow edge cases worked out to understand their dependencies on other teams. Productions of a new mission began, currently known as Data Heist, which tasks players with reaching a location and stealing data. I'm very interested in that, too. The team also began adding quality of life fixes for Alpha 3.19, including enabling players to see historical data of whether a mission was completed or failed and why. They also modularized the missing persons mission so they can be used more easily by the content teams as part of an ongoing initiative to build a more modular system. So they're starting to modularize some of these too. On the law side, the team worked on the ability to defend a ship's interior from trespassers. This includes not automatically adding players to a ship's comms channel unless they're a party member. I don't know why that's a big deal to me, though. That's a huge deal. Oh. As well as this, a liability system was created to deal with crimes committed with tractor beams. Nice. This includes a new system for attributing blame to active defenestration. We're throwing people out of windows now, CIG? Which is a fancy word for throwing someone out a window. Defenestration of Stanton system. Oh, everyone loves the defenestration of Prague. And the second defenestration of Prague. Oh, that's fantastic. Graphics, VFX programming, and Planet Tech. In March, the graphics team completed a version of mesh generation from spline inputs, which will be used for jump point tunnels. Various shader improvements were made, including recoloring skin using physically based melanin controls, and adding the initial support for customizable makeup and tattoos. Improvements were also made to water reflection, refraction, and fogging. Yes! Yes! Good! Good. These are good. Work began to unify the static and skinned meshed formats, which should lead to larger draw call reduction on complex meshes. They also started to integrate new logic into each individual streaming system for testing. In addition, the graphics team made various changes to render texture system, including new culling options that will be required for the interior map feature. Oh, they're sort of working on the interior maps. For Vulkan, Vulkan update, updates were made to the backend to help visual parity with DX11. Various debug modes were also added to Gen 12 to surpass the functionality of Legacy Renderer. Meanwhile, the VFX programming team continued their work on quantum travel and fire. Quantum travel effects now rotate correctly based on the movement and direction, and various visual improvements were made based on feedback. For the fire system, the framework for GPU fire particle spawning was added to allow for a much greater particle counts. Entities can now exchange heat in the room as they reside within 2. Can exchange heat with the room they reside in within 2. Okay, so they can heat up a room now. In addition, the VFX team continued improving their editor, adding the ability to reference effects from each other. They also made improvements to lighting effects in gas clouds. The Planet Tech team progressed with water, iterating on the simulation quantity and building a system to manage and combine simulations for water surfaces. Work on the asteroid system continued too, with the aim of achieving a much more flexible setup for shaping and distribution. Awesome. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, especially stuff that we haven't seen in Star Citizen Live. Vulcan updates. What's some of the other ones we saw? Defenestration. Data heist. Let's see, where's the other ones? Ship refinery work. Lots of stuff out here. Weapon heat characteristics. There's a lot of cool stuff. It seems a lot of stuff in the gameplay section rather than in the like the overall tools section, though, which is nice. So, and a lot of ships too. In-game branding Montreal. The in-game branding team continued to work on Pyro Gang's visual identity and environment. They also made final touch-ups to Invictus Launch Week and are currently exploring Ruin Station in pursuit of adding new branding elements throughout. Lighting. The lighting team spent part of March working on Invictus Launch Week before continuing to light new and existing areas around Ruin Station. They also progressed with their work on the Colonial Outpost modules in development by Sandbox One team. The Sandbox One team. So, for those of you who don't know, Ruin Station is big. And unlike other setups in, like, landing zones, we really do know, we'll have a lot of run of Ruin Station. A lot of the station will likely be available because Ruin Station is not just a landing zone, it's also a play space area. At least in the lore, the concept was that the station itself is an active war zone. And there are some places that are safe and some places that are not. So smaller gangs are vying for control of the actual station, even though it is under the control of our old friend Xenothreat. So, live tools. In Montreal, the Live Tools team began designing a new module for the Network Operations Center. In the future, this shard management tool will support server meshing by displaying real-time information about the servers. That's something they've been working on for a while. I guess they started actually... started designing it now, so... Locations EU. By that, I mean they mentioned talking about it in the past, like kind of having discussions about it. So now they're actually into the building it. The EU locations team progressed with Ruin Station, looking at new ways for player to traverse and how new gameplay elements will fit into the areas already developed. They also progressed with the local law offices, developing layouts and working towards playable prototypes. Cargo elevators were worked on alongside the USPU team last month. Locations prototyped elevators and how they will work in various scenarios. EU2 also worked alongside mission features to add new platforms to Orison. These will be used for missions and to add additional points of interest to the city. The EU Sandbox team created a non-airlock outpost entries, which will be used in Pyro's breathable atmospheres. Papa bless. Thank you. Thank you. They're currently tidying up the underfloor areas for outpost modules for the use in stealth gameplay. Work also continued on wrapping up the final pieces for Content Pack 3, which will enable the team to move on to outpost distribution across Pyro. So if you saw the, was it the 2020 gameplay demo they did for CitizenCon, where they were actually in Pyro, where they did the kind of like the stealth stuff where they had like the little crawl spaces on top and bottom. They're kind of trying to do that with the idea of having stealth because CIG has been heavily investing in stealth gameplay and AI to counter stealth gameplay which initially I thought was for Squadron to add more variety, but I guess it's also being added to Star Citizen to, again, add more variety. CIG really does seem to be committed to making Star Citizen a space game, an FPS game, a stealth simulator, and a tycoon game all at once. Design is almost finished with the markup for Content Pack 2, and we'll be moving on to the final pieces of Content Pack 3 as they're completed. They're also near closing out the Stanton and Pyro jump points, with some final bits of feedback being applied. So they're finished with the jump points, which is nice. In March, EU Sandbox 2 continued their work on the underground facilities, and which can be seen in the recent episode of Inside Star Citizen. Finally, the Organics team progressed with Rocky Caves. Upcoming work involves reworking and touching up Pyro's planets and moons to bring them up to current standard. All right. Narrative. This is my favorite. It's my favorite part, chat. With Alpha 318 live, the narrative team shifted back to work on the upcoming patches as well as ongoing development. They worked closely with various design team owners to further develop mission text for several upcoming mission types, including salvage, investigation, mining, and some new ones that have yet to be announced. For Pyro, narrative revisited some of the scientific lore around the planets to ensure it all aligns up with the latest design and gameplay intents. They also started drawing out territories for various gangs in the system to see where they could operate and overlap, which would establish conflict zones. That's cool. Permanent PvP conflict zones, depending on who you're aligned with in Pyro. Very planet side 2 of you, CIG. See what I mean? They also began looking at the outlaw lifestyle, specifically brainstorming a new approach for players drifting into criminality, rather than having unlawful missions available alongside legal ones. Good idea. On the IRSI website, the team posted a Whitley's Guide on the Origin 300 series and published another installment of Loremakers Community Questions. You should see this. Online Services Montreal. In March, the online services team focused on hotfixes for the Alpha 318 live release. These were primarily aimed at inventory login, entitlement, and revealing stress on global databases. For Alpha 318.1, the team added a new ASOP ship delivery system, which is in Alpha 3.1. Yeah, we'll see that soon. Which means you have to actually call your ship, and then it gets added to your inventory, and then you have to release it. Now, I do think that this system is going to be the predecessor for what's eventually going to happen. I'm almost certain that the ASOP terminals will be gone possibly before 4.0 and moved to your Mobiglass, because CIG is trying to move everything they can to Mobiglass if it's possible. So, and if they can move it out of Mobiglass, they'll move it out of Mobiglass. So having the ability to call your ship, which we know is in Squadron 42, to be able to recall your ship to have it come to you, is definitely something you want to do in the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if they wrap that functionality in with the new Mobiglass into a ability to call up your ship to a landing pad so you can get access to it. Because eventually, we're going to have our ships that are permanently in those landing pads. So it'll be more of a, hey, get this to launch status rather than, calling it out, because you'll just be able to get to your ship. So no matter what, the ASOP terminal is going away, and I think it's going to come sooner rather than later. Systematic services and tools. Alongside supporting Alpha 318 release and bug fixing cargo, ASOP terminal and GIM issues, the team began R&D for a service-speaking architecture update. That's something we need so badly. They also made progress on character creation service, supported USPU in testing the new expo halls, solved subsumption editor issues, and worked on design on the Quantum/Odin tool, or Quantum/Odin tool. So they're still working on some Odin stuff, which is the quanta background simulation. So almost done. The UI artist supported several upcoming gameplay features by creating screen mockups and concepts alongside with ideas for in-world displays. Several artists and some of the UI tech team worked on new visor and lens setup for Squadron 42, which will eventually make its way into the UPU. UI team helped improve VMA data download speeds and improve the underlying loadout system for Arena Commander and Star Marine. They also made incremental improvements to several areas, including text edit boxes, scroll bars, hollow volume interactions, and hyperlinks. Lastly, the VFX team put the finishing touches on their new particle library structure this month. This is in anticipation of the new external ref functionality that will be moving into testing phase immediately. This will provide a way for VFX artists to create template effects, which can then be referenced to other libraries. This method will make it easier maintenance in the coming years as Star Citizen increases in size. All right. So what did we learn today? Nothing. Nothing, Jared. Well, there's a lot of stuff that's coming in here. Some UI stuff specifically for Squadron that's being moved over first to Squadron to Star Citizen. We saw movement updates from Squadron, which is being implemented into Star Citizen, specifically around the EVA system. We see work on Quantum, the background simulation, the background dynamic world. We see hotfixes, a possible gang warfare zones you can go into for some rep and or money of some mission stuff. New missions being added, a stealth infiltration mission to steal stuff. Let's see. A lot of content packs. They're starting to move a lot of their assets over to Pyro and Ruin Station to work on some of this stuff to kind of craft those things in the right places. Cargo elevators were being worked on. Trying to go through all of this sort of thing. Working on the Pyro gangs, touching up on Ruin Station. They've been working on the Dusters. Working on Planetech did water simulation improvements. Fire can propagate properly. They moved a bunch of stuff from Vulcan. They're adding new. They're modularizing mission systems more. So like the investigation missions or the body missions you have to find, those are being modularized. Defenestration gameplay, the best news of all time. They're starting to work on the Refinery gameplay. They're adding new FPS weapons overheat features. Arena Commander's fully in there. Let's see what else we got. Lots of physics bugs fixed. Lots of ships. 2 new vehicles, which will be at E3, almost certainly be at 319 because they're past their gray box phase and they're past their final art phase. The Spirit and the Miss Hull C are just zooming towards that finish line fairly quickly. All of the Spirits are in Lot 0, which is the last step before final art. 2 unannounced vehicles are in white box. The Freelancer Misk is getting its interior components reworked. Sadly, not interior rework yet, but that. And a new unique vehicle in gray box, which has both maneuvering components and a suspension system, which confuses me. And the Suntech guy is in gray box right now. We also see some new art team for Headhunters and Rough and Ready gangs, which are probably both Pyro gangs. And then AI tech on idle systems, allowing them to avoid areas that are like dangerous dynamically or procedurally or statically, where like a mission generator can be like, hey, all AI should avoid this area because it's dangerous. And of course, the mad lads decided that they're going to take AI, trolleys, and elevators and see what happens when they put them together. Still have to see what happens. Hopefully that gives you an insight of what happened during March for the monthly report. As always, I do want to know in the comments below if this helps you. I've been doing these full read-throughs because people seem to like them. Summaries are great. They work fine, but I tend to find that summaries they don't give you the full context. They give you snippets of information. So if you're really looking to find out the full context of what's happening in Star Citizen, you really need to kind of read the whole thing. And if you're listening to me instead of reading, I'd like you to read as well. Hopefully you find some stuff that's interesting you can pull up. I'll leave the link to the actual monthly report in the description so you can check it yourself. But I do thank you for listening as well. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.